along with this one, the Catalyst Leader. So 2 weeks ago, January 1st, we launched a new series. We wanted to start the year with a series on leadership and becoming a change maker wherever God puts you in this world. And so we're taking themes from Brad Lomenick's book, The Catalyst Leader. And not only is Brad coming here in 2 weeks to speak on these ideas, but they're brilliant ideas in this book. Brad, maybe more than any other person in the country, has done more to develop emerging young Christian leaders than anyone else. And so you want to take a copy home. They're in our coffee shop. And then definitely you don't want to miss Brad in 2 weeks. One of his themes in the book is the idea of excellence. And so today I want to talk about your call to becoming a person of excellence, a person whose life is defined by excellence. It's one of your personal life core values. It's a lifelong sustainable habit that you've grabbed onto. People see it as part of your DNA. If you think about it with me, the people you work with really only fall into one of two categories. Either they are a person of excellence and everything they do is with a great deal of excellence, or, you know, the other side, they're slackers and they just kind of skate through their job, just hoping to get a paycheck. I've known those people over my life. One of the first ones I think of was a really good friend that I went to grad school with. And while we were in grad school, he had a job, I had a job, but sometimes I would call him because I would get off early, like at 3, and I'd call him, I'd say, he was an appraiser, working as an appraiser. By the way, at this point in LA, in the early 90s, houses were selling like crazy. There was a market boom, and I even had friends who were buying houses, painting them in a day, then sitting in a lawn chair in the front yard waiting for it to sell. So he had a lot of appraisals to do. So I'd call him at like 1 in the afternoon and say, hey, how about golf at 3? I get off at 3. Can you do it? He'd go, let me think about it. I've got four more appraisals to do. All right, I can do it in the next 2 hours. And I would say, and get your clubs from home? He said, no problem. And he would meet me 2 hours later. I would say, did you get the appraisals done? He said, of course I did. And I would say, well, how did you do that? He said, well, I just drive up, take a picture, and then keep going. I'd say, did you get out of the car and walk? No, just from the front. I just need one picture, and I know how to do an appraisal, Palmer. You don't worry about that. And he wouldn't even go in. And this was before I knew that the banks only lend up to how much a house appraises for, and he hadn't even walked in. He wasn't an appraiser very long. I'm just going to tell you that. Skaters lose their job. You know, when you're a slacker, you just don't stay there very long. My challenge today is that as a child of God, and I have this key value on the screen, that one of your callings as a son or a daughter of Jesus Christ is to give everything that you do your absolute best, to do it with excellence. And when you do, you bring glory to God and you honor Him. And so I want to make our way through a couple of passages this morning and talk about how do we make excellence a core value for life. And I want to start with this thought, that whatever you do, whatever God calls you to do in this world with your life, give it your very best. Give it your absolute best. So let's start in Mark chapter 14. Open your Bibles there. We have this incident with Jesus having a meal when he's interrupted. Verse 3. While Jesus was in Bethany reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, why the waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And they rebuked her harshly. Leave her alone, Jesus says. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing. And so she takes the most expensive perfume, the very best that she can get her hands on, the absolute best, and she brings it to Christ. This perfume we read was worth like a year's wages. You talk about expensive perfume. This isn't like the Jovan Musk you bought your girlfriend in high school. It's not like that. It's not like Curve that you buy at Walgreens. It's not that. This is the real deal. This wasn't eau de Toilette. You know, some of you guys went shopping at Christmas and you saw perfume, you know, Chanel 5, $88. Or the eau de Toilette, which is just like $18.99. You go, oh, what's wrong with that? Well, do you know what that means in French, eau de Toilette? It means water of the toilet. That's exactly what that means. I just want to tell you. This wasn't that. And she brings her absolute best. And Jesus says, leave her alone. She's doing it for me. I think sometimes we get the idea that when we bring things to God or to the church, that it's okay to bring our leftovers or our second best. I learned a very valuable lesson years ago when I was a pastor in Wheaton, Illinois. And our pastor, Rob Boo, got up on a Sunday morning. We were helping to rebuild a church in Florida City, Florida, after Hurricane Andrew. And he said, we want to replace the pastor's library. And so I need your books. He said, but don't bring me the books you don't read and you don't like. Don't bring me your old, worn out, beat up books. Bring your best books. And I learned something valuable there, that we don't bring our second best to God. And so, for example, when we have Barefoot Sundays here at the Grove, it's because of what Rob Boo said that I say to you, we need your best and your favorite shoes. Don't bring your nasty, worn-out Skechers that smell like cheese. We don't want those. You know, sometimes we think, oh, there are people in Africa, they'll be glad to have these beat-up, nasty shoes with holes in them. No, if you don't want them, we don't want them. Nobody wants them. I passed an edict not long ago here at the Grove. I banned all used couches because I was walking around one afternoon and I counted 10 used, beat-up couches like in our junior high room and our high school room. And I pulled our staff together. I said, from now on, no more. You can't accept these nasty couches because people think, oh, the church will like this. I don't like it because it has stains on it. They were all some shade of brown, like a baby's diaper, all the couches we had here. And if you don't want it because of the cat hair and all the stains, then we don't want it either, you know. And so I came and I found a super of who we're building this building right then of Concord, and I said, hey, you have all these dumpsters out here. Can we throw about 10 couches in there? And he said, oh man, then I'll have to pay to take it to the dump. But he said, but you know what? We've got a huge hole in the back field there. We need to raise the level. It's about 15 feet too deep. So why don't you throw the couches in the hole in the back field? I said, really? And you'll bury them and crush them? He said, yes. That was my favorite day ever. And it only could have been better if we lit them on fire, but we buried. You know how satisfying it was to bury those nasty couches? And I think sometimes we come to God and we think, oh, well, I can bring my second best, and it's not like that. Give your best. You're a child of the King. Here's how Brad says it in his chapter on excellence. He says, the church is the bride of Christ. He said we should be doing things better than Apple, better than Disney, better than Google. There is way more at stake with what God has called us to. And spirit-filled should not equal poorly planned, thrown together, and poorly executed. And no one should say, I'm doing this for Jesus, and then follow it up with a half-hearted effort or an underwhelming effort. You know, and he's right, because the Bible keeps talking about how we're supposed to bring our best before God. There's this theme through Scripture of bringing your first fruit. Don't bring the fruit that dropped on the ground and it's rotting. Don't bring the lamb with a broken leg. Don't bring the lame. It says don't bring the lame lamb. And when we bring something to God, it's supposed to be our very best. Paul writes about this in Colossians. So turn over there with me. I want to read what he says about whatever we do, we're called to give it our very best. Colossians 3, verse 23. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. As we read that, you know what I think we need, most of us need? We need a theology, a robust theology of work. We need to grab onto this idea that Paul says. He says, again in 1 Corinthians 10:31, he says, whatever you do, work at it with your whole heart, because then you bring glory to God. And when we read here, whatever you do, that whatever is whatever you do. Anything that God has called you to do. I grew up in church, and growing up in church, I often heard life talked about as things that were sacred and things that were secular. Any of you grew up in churches that use that language? There was secular music and there was sacred music. But the more I understand the Bible, the more I realize maybe that dichotomy does not exist. Because sometimes we just talk about things that are sacred as like when we pray or read the Bible or sing great songs with Josh or go to church or teach Sunday school, we talk about those things as being sacred. But that's only in about 5% of your life. The other 95% of your life, I used to hear people talk about that as your secular life. But that's everything else. That's your realtor life. That's your sales life. That's your taking kids to school life. That's your Pilates life. That's everything else. As though it doesn't matter. Somehow we've only given God 5%. Do you know that the Hebrew people, they don't talk about the spiritual and the sacred? In the Old Testament, the word spiritual, as though in the way that we use it, it's not even there. That word doesn't exist in Hebrew. Why is that? Because they viewed all of life as sacred. Everything you did was under the control of God and was for God. In fact, if you read the Bible, you quickly see that the Bible, like in books like Leviticus, I don't know when you read Leviticus last. My wife told me this week she's reading Leviticus. Good luck with that. That's going to be a long read, but that's awesome. But when you read Leviticus, there's all kinds of obscure laws, and it seems like, why are these even there? There's laws about eating duck, laws about bacon, there's things like that. There's laws about sideburns. There's laws about the thread content in the material you use. And in Leviticus it says, polyester is an abomination to God. That's what it says. I'm just telling you what it says. But you might wonder, why does God bother with all of these things? Do you know why? Because it's all sacred. It all matters. And so that's why I say, whatever you do, do it with your whole heart. Give it your very best. And New Testament writers like Peter began to write about the fact that we also are priests. Let me read to you. This is 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5. And now you have become building stones for God's use and building his house. What's more, you are his holy priest. That's you. You need to understand this. You are his holy priest. When Martin Luther started the Reformation in 1517, one of his driving themes is this: the priesthood of all believers. That the priests weren't just those appointed by the church in Rome. That as God's people, you also are a priest. Yes, you are an engineer and you are a priest. You're a teacher and you are a priest. You're a nurse and you are a priest. You're a college student and you are a priest. And then I would say to that if God has called you to be a nurse, then be the very best nurse possible. If you're a realtor, if you're in sales and you're a realtor, then determine to be the best realtor in Gilbert or Chandler. If you're a teacher, then be the best teacher in the district. If you're a college student, don't sit in the back of the class and just skate by. Be the very best student. And then when you do that, we bring honor to the name of God. I think what is missing in the lives of so many people is what I said earlier, is this robust theology of work. I think we miss sometimes that work is divine, that work is sacred. God has called you to work. I think sometimes we think of Sunday as sacred and the rest of the week as secular. And I want to just say that isn't the way the Bible talks about it. That Monday is sacred. Tuesday is sacred. Wednesday is sacred. Whatever you do for God is sacred. Do it with excellence. So that's my first thought, my first challenge. The next thing that I want to say, if you are going to make excellence a core value of your life, then I'll say this next. Have character. It's a very simple thought. And I have on here, who are you? Who you are when nobody is looking. So let's go back to our text. So I think all of the gospel writers talk about this interaction Jesus has with this woman with the perfume. Look at John, because John calls out the person who's criticizing the woman. This is John 12, verse 4. But one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, who was later to betray him, objected. Why wasn't this perfume sold and the money given to the poor? It's worth a year's wages. And he did not say this because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. John just throws him right under the bus, absolutely Judas, and then just calls him says it like it is. As keeper of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. He's saying that Judas was as crooked as a $3 bill. He has no character. He has no scruples. Excellence, think about this with me. Excellence is a character issue. The way you do your work, for example, your job, is a character issue. In his chapter on excellence, Brad writes about one of the first jobs he had out of high school. He said he was working on the night shift at a grocery store, and his first job was to mop all the floors in this huge grocery store. And so he realized that on the night shift, hey, there's not very many people around. So he realized, maybe I don't have to mop every aisle. So he said I would mop aisle 1, then skip aisle 2, go to aisle 3, and then go to aisle 5, and aisle 7, and then your job gets done really quick. And he's saying, it's the night shift. Nobody's looking, nobody's watching. But then he said after a number of days of doing this, an older, wiser employee came up to him, and he said, Brad, I've seen you skipping aisles. We think nobody's looking, don't we? He said, I've seen you skipping aisles, Brad. And he says, Brad, you're better than that. I know you're better than that. Brad said that hit him right in the heart, just stabbed him. And he said those words have stuck with him the rest of his life, that you're better than that. I want to say that about you. Whatever you're doing in this life, do it with excellence, because it's a statement about your character. There's absolutely no substitute for character and your reputation. Your reputation means everything. And where does the rubber hit the road for us? How does this live out? I think to be a person of character, first of all, it means that you keep your word. If you quote a price, if you're in sales, and then you realize, whoa, I'm not going to get much of a commission, don't change the price. Stick to the price you quoted. If you promised a delivery date, then deliver on that date. Keep your word. Being a person of character means that you say the best about people around you. I think people with low character, they criticize a lot. I think being a person of character means that you are responsive. For example, you answer emails. I think it's a character issue. Being a person of character means that you fix mistakes. Mistakes happen, but fixing them says a lot about your character. I think being a person of character also means that you have standards so high that you start to annoy other people. Your standards are so high. In Colossians chapter 3, we read about high standards. So I want to look at it again. This time I'm going to read it from the Message Bible. Don't just do the minimum that will get you by. You know, some people try to skate through work like that. Do your best. Underline that. Work from the heart for your real master, for God. Confident that you'll get paid in full when you come into your inheritance. Keep in mind always that the ultimate master you're serving is Christ. The sullen servant who does shoddy work will be responsible. Being a follower of Jesus doesn't cover up bad work. Don't you love that? Do your best work. I learned a lesson years ago about trying to skate by and cover up bad work. I told you about the housing boom in the early 90s in LA. And all of my friends were flipping houses, and I thought, I'm missing out. I need to flip a house. So managed to buy a house to flip, and the goal was to refurbish it in a month and get it back on the market before the first payment hits, right? So I'm ripping up the lawn, putting in sprinklers, repainting the whole house by myself. I'm laying tile by myself, doing it all. I painted the whole interior in one day. I was proud of how fast I was flying and got it on the market before the first payment was due. And then I still remember the first clients coming through to look at the house. And we get to a bedroom, and the guy stands, and he's looking out a window, and he says, this is incredible. And I thought, wow, I did a nice job here. He's impressed. And he's pointing at something. So I walk over, he says, this is amazing. I go, what's amazing? He says, whoever painted your house, they painted right over the dead flies. And he's like, the flies were now a shade of blue. And I looked at it, and I was just angry. And I said, slackers. Can't get good help anymore, can you? I had painted right over the dead flies. I was in too much of a hurry. So much of a hurry, I didn't even clean the windowsills. It was horrible work. And the house didn't sell to him until I cleaned that mess up and all kinds of things like that. You know, what you do isn't just for you. You represent God in heaven with your work, and sometimes we miss that. They say this about character. I've heard it said that relationships get you your first job. Your ability, your skills get you your second job, but character gives you a career. Skill is something that you do. Character is who you are. You know, for example, a very tall person may get a job in the NBA. You can be 7 foot. That may get you a job, but that won't give you a career. Have you noticed that sometimes even the most gifted, skilled athletes will be fired and let go from a team because they lack character? Character is critical to who we are. Think about this with me. You can know a lot of people. You can make great relationships. You can be very talented at what you do. You can bust it and work really hard. But if you don't have character, none of that matters a cent. If you don't have character, you can be a hard worker and be very good at it, but if you don't have character, your coworkers will distance themselves from you. You will lose every client. On the flip side, if you have character, then people stay with you forever and they stand up for you. So that's my second thought. Character will give you this great competitive advantage. All right, so how do we make excellence a core value for life? Here's the next challenge. Do work really hard. When you work really hard at it. Next slide. There we go. All right. In Colossians chapter 3, I'm going to read it this time. I read it from the TNIV. I read it from the Message Bible. I want to read it from the TLB, Today's Living Bible, because it starts with these words. Work hard. Don't you like that? And cheerfully at all you do, just as though you're working for the Lord, and not merely for your masters, remembering that it is the Lord who is going to pay you, giving you your full portion of what he owes. He is the one you are really working for. I think that in life, everything multiplies by this phrase, busted. How hard are you going to work? You know, sometimes you look at executives of the largest companies in the world, and you think, well, how did they get that job? Is it because they have a great education? No, almost never. They weren't born to lead. It's because they worked hard. Marissa Mayer, for example, became the CEO of Yahoo. Not because of her great education, but because when she was at Google, she had this reputation of working all night, putting on all-nighters, sleeping under her desk, and they said managing her showers. I don't know what that means. I think she didn't shower very much because she worked so hard. Mark Cuban, a lot of you know him as a dot-com bubble billionaire, and you think, oh, he just fell backwards into that. No. Mark Cuban, when you know his history, for 7 years, he didn't take a vacation. I'm not saying don't take a vacation, but I think there's seasons in life when you just have to work really hard. Tim Cook at Apple, he starts emailing his employees at 4:30 in the morning. That'd be the worst boss in the world, but some people, because of their work ethic, they keep getting promoted. I think the problem many of us have is, they say that, for example, 70% of Americans don't just say they don't like their job. 70% of Americans say, I can't stand my job. And I want to say that as a follower of Jesus Christ, we're going to change that. And I think the trouble is that we have a great plan for the first 22 years of life. For example, from birth to age 22, we all know what we're supposed to do. Graduate from kindergarten. That's a hard one. You got a hood and a gown for that. You know, then make it through high school, and then hopefully get through college. Everybody knows what that plan is for the first 22 years. After age 65, everybody has a great plan. We all know what the plan is. What is that? We all say we're going to retire one day at 65. But from age 22 to 65, most people don't have a great plan. We think, I'll just fall backwards, maybe find a job that I like or a career. And so we don't end up loving what we do. And I want to remind you this morning that work is not a curse. Your job is a gift from God. Work is divine. When you read Genesis, you start in Genesis, you read that God worked. He worked so hard for 6 days, he had to rest on the seventh. Well, we read that Adam and Eve, they worked not just when they were sent east of Eden, and some people say, well, where is that? Where's east of Eden? I'll tell you where it is. It's east of San Diego. It's Yuma. So that's where they were sent. But even before they were sent to Yuma, they worked. We read they worked really hard. Work is not a curse. Work is sacred. Your job is sacred because you are a child of God. Your life is sacred. And so your job is divine. I want to challenge you tomorrow morning to say, wake up and say, God, help me kill it at work today. Because what that job God has given you isn't something to be taken lightly. It's not something you just are called to skate through. The wise King Solomon, he says it like this, Ecclesiastes 9, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. I was surprised when we do a camp here for kids every few years with NFL players from the Cardinals and coaches from the Cardinals. And we're doing one of the camps a couple of years ago, and we had about 18 Cardinal players here on our campus. And so they had been coaching the kids out in the field, and then we brought them in our gym, and the kids all sat on the floor, and then they started asking questions to the players. And this one, maybe kid, he's like in fourth grade, he calls on Bertrand Berry, who's just this big, beastie NFL player, and he says, Mr. Berry, he says, what is the hardest thing about being an NFL player? And I think it's just a great question. And Bertrand Berry comes back with the most brilliant response. Bertrand says this. He said, walking through the doors of the gym. Isn't that true? How many of you want to stay in shape, but you hate walking through the doors of the gym? And Berry knew that if you're going to play on Sunday, then you better bust it on Monday in the gym, and you better be there Tuesday, and you better bust it Wednesday and Thursday, because if you don't, you're going to be riding the pine, or you're going to be cut, and you're going to be at home laying on a couch if you don't work hard. And he put his finger on what's missing most, I think, in a lot of our lives. I think maybe in our jobs or in your job, you feel like you don't have control over everything, and we don't. But the one thing that you have 100% control over is how hard you work. And so work hard, and when you do, you bring glory to God. I want to end with this thought, going back to Mark chapter 14. Focus on one thing. And I want to challenge you to declutter your life and focus on one thing. So let's go back to Mark 14. I'll pick up in verse 6. Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. His invitation is to put Christ above it all, to make him the focus of your life. The problem is that our lives get very cluttered. Our schedules get cluttered. Our houses get cluttered. There's a group of researchers at UCLA that for the last few years have been studying the stuff Americans keep in their homes. Who knew there was a study in this field? And the guy leading the study, it's a professor by the name of Anthony Grayish. He says, we have never had as much stuff in a single family home as we do now. In part, it's related to this most intense consumer society that we live in. Accumulation has become a way of life. And I think when you accumulate and you clutter your home and clutter your garage, your life starts to get cluttered. I was in my garage right after Christmas with my son, and we're putting Christmas decorations up on a shelf. I'm one of those guys that loves to have a clean garage. I hate clutter in my garage, and I'm one of those guys with the shelves. And so he's tall enough to push the bin up there, and right when he's pushing it up, he hits this bass woofer speaker that I had been keeping for years, one day planning to put in my car. The kid helping me had totaled my car in a school parking lot, and all the insurance company gave me was one lousy bass woofer, and I've held on to it thinking, one day I'm gonna, I need to listen to LL Cool J and those guys, and so I need this. But it's been on the shelf for years, like 5 years. And so he's putting the bin up, and he hits the speaker, and it's coming right down on my head. But I managed to catch it. Now I'm angry. I'm throwing it away. So I'm walking to the garbage can, about to throw it away. And he says, Dad, where are you going? I said, I'm throwing it away. He says, don't, I want it. I said, for what? I said, it won't even fit in your Jetta. And he says, He says, I'm going to sell it on OfferUp. I said, all the power to you. He got $30 for it. All right, your junk is worth something. I didn't know that. I think sometimes our garages get cluttered. Sometimes our desks get cluttered. Our offices get cluttered. Our cars get cluttered. And often, a messy life on the outside is a sign of what's happening on the inside. I learned something from another pastor in California I worked with. His name is Jay Stevens. And I reported to him back then, and I would meet with him every week. And every week I met with him, his desk, there was nothing on it. And he would, when I sat down, he would pull out a file with my name on it, put it on his desk, and we'd talk. And I said, finally I said, Jay, how do you keep your desk so clean? Everyone else's desk is a mess. He said, Palmer, I just focus on one thing. I just work on one thing at a time. It's that simple. What a great answer to life. I think sometimes our work lives get cluttered, our homes get cluttered, our schedules get cluttered. And in the end, when that happens, we forget about God. In Luke chapter 10, Martha and Mary are making dinner. I should say Martha is for Jesus. He's at another meal. And Martha gets really annoyed that Mary's not helping her. And so Jesus says to Martha, he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about so many things, but only a few things are needed. In fact, only one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen what is better. And so when you look at your life, can I challenge you to declutter your schedule, declutter your office, declutter your home so you can focus on Christ? And maybe this year, as we start a new year, there's one thing God has given you to focus on. Maybe you have a senior in high school who needs your help getting into college, getting the right grade on the SAT, or filling out the application. Focus on that one thing. Maybe you have a preschooler at home, and it's her last year, and then she's off to kindergarten, and then she has to graduate from that. She's really busy after that. Maybe focus on her. Or maybe at work, it's not been going well. So maybe focus on that more than anything else. Quit the slow-pitch softball league. Get rid of all the ancillary things that are robbing your attention. Maybe it's your marriage. Maybe you've been through a rocky season. Maybe God this year right now needs you to focus on that. I don't know what it is.